welcome back to another episode of Conversations, the show where we talk about some of the things that might be a little bit more beneficial for us to talk about in the work environment. And today we're having a conversation that is very near and dear to my heart because we're talking about parenting and careers. And my personal experience from the mom perspective, and I have Erick here to have the dad perspective, which I'm very excited about. And we'll introduce Erick in a moment. But one of my experiences with there was a lot of conversation about trades, right? Trading your career for parenting, choosing a career, choosing your kids when, are you going to be a stay-at-home parent? I mean, this is all, there's so many things. There's so many things as part of the narrative. And one of the things that I think we maybe just ignore, whether that's intentionally or not intentionally, is that people have a parenting experience at work when they're parents. So I'm really excited to have Erick here to have this conversation with me today, because Erick is all about optimizing both the parenting environment and the career environment. And so today I want to encourage all of you who are joining us live or who are watching in the replay, if you have specific experiences that you have experienced in the past or experiencing currently that you would like to talk through and get some insights on, please share them in the comments. If you have any specific questions, or if you've been on a parenting career journey, please share your perspectives as well, because the more different perspectives we bring into the conversation, the more we all get to learn from our time together today. So let's learn a little bit more about Erick before we start off the conversation. So Erick, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and why did you choose to focus on both parenting and career building?
Hey, Tracy. Thank you so much. First off, it's a pleasure to be here. Parenting has been a struggle. You know, it's you get your first kid and then you're like, it seems like everything I do is wrong. The test child. But ultimately I found that, as they grow up, at first they go through the little pet stage, where you're like, they're happy regardless of what you do, but they start to develop their own personalities. And then you have to be more cautious, right? Like, what are the messages that you're sending, not just verbal ones, but also your examples. Those are some things I started to see a bit more. Whereas, for example, with my daughter, it was, we used to just have fun regardless. But now it started to be like, hey, I'm noticing that when I come home, for example, from work, I wasn't, my emotions were basically being seeped into her. Right. And I started to see some things. And so that was kind of the beginning to help me understand, like, I can't just focus on my work and just making sure they have stuff. I have to focus on providing other things for them as well. Like, like raising them well, their emotional needs, things like that. So I decided to take on that journey, and it was a lot of trial and error, I would say, and even now, I mean, my kids keep changing the script on me. So, but it's just having the ability, and that was part of the conversation, the balance to be able to say when they decide to evolve and change and just be a little different than what you're used to. As parents, we need to have the flexibility in our careers to address them rather than just say, I'll kick the can down the road and I'll address it later, because maybe you'll never get addressed. So that was kind of one of the reasons why I really enjoyed focusing on parenting and careers as well.
Yeah. Well, and I think because, again, in my experience, there is so much narrative on like having to choose, and there are like, I have my own experience about like what my parents chose. Like my dad worked full time and mostly out of town, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom. And so it was really interesting for me when I had my son, because one of the things I realized on maternity leave was that I was not cut out to be a stay-at-home mom, that I needed more than that. And so it was hard to think about like why, like, I don't want to trade. I don't want to trade away all of my time with my son, nor do I want to trade away all of this like really interesting work that I do. And so, I mean, now I'm an entrepreneur, so it's a lot easier to have the conversation of how do I create that balance. But there are many, many, many millions upon millions of people who are working for other people, who are working shift work, who are working for corporate jobs, who have the same desires, who want to be able to focus on their kids when they get home, who want to be able to take the afternoon off to go to a skating day or to the play, right? The school play or a dance recital. And I think there are work environments that make it available, but I still don't think that it's really part of the conversation in a workplace, right? Like people are still ashamed that they want to take the afternoon off and go watch their kid dance. And I'm like, this is one of the things I'd love to address in this conversation today is our own mindsets about what parenting and careers can look like, and then how we as individuals can also support other people in our work environments to maintain the fact that to want to have both of those things is fair. And if you want to have both of those things, then we can figure out a way to make it possible that works for all people. So, Erick, can you tell me a little bit, because I know you work in, like, you've done a lot of personal work in this arena, but you also work with clients in this arena. And so what are some of the things you see that maybe are like the indicators of this is a conversation I haven't been having and now I need to have it?
A conversation at work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the things I've seen is it boils down to some kind of fear. And it's just, they know they want some things. It's just easier to have those conversations of, sorry to disappoint you with your family than it is with your boss. And so they will take on more work. They will, if they're given more and more and more, they will keep on doing that, pushing family aside. And, it's easier to say to the family, like, hey, sorry, this has to get done, right? We need the food, we need the money. And it's just easier. And we tend to just go with whatever is easy at the time. But in the long term, it starts to hurt more,
Right.
Like kids eventually are just going to realize, like, dad was never here. So why should I be there for them? Right. And that's a tough wake up call. But
Yeah.
at that time, it's much more difficult to fix it than early on. So being able to set those boundaries early on, having those conversations, I think it's incredibly important. And I would say that if you want to start, I would just figure out what it is. What's your current state? Talk to your manager. Just ask, like, what are the expectations? Do you expect me to work 60 hours a week? Do you expect me to work 40? What are the expectations? What do you want from me? Right? Just have that very, very clear. And then go to your family and say, now, where are we now? And what do we actually want? And do those align? This is your career in its current state allow you to have the life that you want with your family? Because if they're at odds, that you're going to have to disappoint somebody. Now the question is who. So you can start taking steps, but a lot of people don't take the time to actually figure this out. Talk to the manager, right? And the conversations with the family are, I'm sorry, this is not going to work, or we need to sacrifice. It's always about sacrifice.
Right.
But yeah, that's some of the things I've seen so far.
Yeah. Okay, so two things are coming up for me because for those of you who are watching live or who follow me on LinkedIn, I am running a campaign for belonging coming up with my friend Paul. And we were having this conversation about, like, when do we want, it's a weekly workshop thing for 10 weeks. And we were having this conversation about, well, when do we want to schedule this? Because we want it to be at the same time every week so people can know whether they can participate or not. And so originally we're like, okay, let's do during the days, and we worked out this work schedule. And we're like, oh, but what about the people who work full time during the day? Like, maybe we should do it in the evening. So we're going back and forth on this. And at one point, Paul asked me, would we rather be talking to people who want to trade their work time or are willing to invest their work time to improve in this area, which is creating belonging? Or do we want to focus on people who want to trade their family time for improving this area? And I'm like, well, family time is usually where you find more belonging, right? So no, I don't want them to trade that time. I want them to trade their work time. And it was so clear in that moment, right? When someone asks you a question like that and you're like, well, yeah, I don't want people to trade their family time. And I think this is really the point. And the point of conversations like this is to remind us of like, do we really want to trade that? Like, do we really want employees who are willing to trade away all of their family time? Are we willing? One of the things when I came back from maternity leave that was really important for me was family dinner, right? And so I was taking my son to daycare, which I didn't feel great about anyway. And so I had to do that. And I had it written in my contract that I worked from 9 until 4, because that took into account the time I needed to get my son to daycare and the time I needed to go and pick him up from daycare and still get home in time to have family dinner. And there were so many times where that was continually pushed, right? Like people were just like would just push, and be like, I'm just going to schedule this meeting at 4. And I would be like, I can't do the meeting at 4, right? And so just like you said, Eric, there are these boundaries that we need to set. And the important thing about boundaries is that nobody else can know what your boundaries are unless you tell them it. So for me, it came, and I thought like, oh, having this written in my contract is enough, right? Like it means people know that this is important to me, but people forget, right? Especially if it's not important to them. And so I was like, okay, I just need to continually. And so what I started doing was just like making my calendar unavailable in that time spot so people can't book it. And if you overbook me, then you know that I have something else that is a bigger priority than whatever you scheduled. And if you need me to come online later and do some stuff, I can do that, but not in this time frame. I'm not available. And I think for a really long time, like I look at me as a kid, right? And my dad did not have those boundaries, right? Like I'm sure he has a totally different experience than me and a totally different childhood than me and all these things that are contributing to that, but he didn't do that, right? He would work until all hours of the night to get whatever done. And in the work environment, people get used to what you give them, right? And this was one of the really, so actually I'd love to talk about this because you mentioned it in your intro too, this kind of like transition into parenthood, right? Because one of the things I had set a whole bunch of expectations of like how I show up as an employee with my employer. And then I had my son, and then I wasn't willing to do that anymore, right? And that's a hard transition because you're different. You're legitimately a different human now. And you have all of this, like at that point, I had been at my company for 6 years. And I was like, it's just a hard transition for everybody because this is what they've come to expect from me. And I'm no longer willing to do that. So talk to us a little bit about like your journey in that arena and some of the other things that you've seen, maybe just whether that's in conversation or maybe like little activities that people can try to help in that transition.
Yeah. So for that particular event, getting a new kid, my first kid was actually when I was still in school. And that was pretty tough, right? Because then I had to juggle like, okay, I was junior year, so I still had about a year and a half. And I was just like, this is going to be tough, regardless of how you got it. But the priorities shift. All of a sudden, it's like I was spending a lot of time sacrificing sleep for schooling. Now I'm sacrificing it for somebody else who trumps schooling. Doesn't matter. Now, when I had my second son, it was the same thing. I had the paternity leave, but afterwards, I was like, I need to be there. Like I want to, and that's kind of what pushed me to become an entrepreneur sooner, because I was like, I know that my kids will eventually go to school, like my daughter is, right? And then I won't see them for about 8 hours. For these first 5 years, where he's there, my priority is him. It's my daughter, my family, me, because I didn't have that with my daughter. So what that ended up looking like is for these next 5 years, I'll do what I have to make sure that I work while they're in school, where it doesn't affect them. And afterwards, when they go back to school, then great. I can get a job that basically allows me to be there. Right. And so, but those are things that I had to prepare for quite a bit, to make sure that I could set boundaries, said no. It reminds me actually with a story that you were saying, people booking you at the last minute. Every Thursday I would have daddy-daughter night. So I would go and take my daughter to have usually Arctic Circle. She would always pick Arctic Circle for the shakes and all of that. And we would leave like as soon as it's 5 o'clock. We'll get ready and we'll leave. And it was getting to about 4:30, and I got a message because I was helping sustain some production lines. And the message said something like, "There's this thing we need this fixed." And I basically just said like, "Okay, send me what you need, what you have." And I got enough emails to read for about 2 hours, and I was like, I have 30 minutes and I'm not gonna read all of this. So so I messaged them and I just asked like, I have 30 minutes, what can I do for you? Right. And so we jumped on the call, and very quickly we figured out that even though the initial message was it looked very panicky and like we need this ASAP, it honestly wasn't. And it was gonna take weeks to solve it. And rather than me spending my evening and disappointing my daughter trying to solve something that wouldn't be solved anyways, in 30 minutes we were able to figure out this is the plan forward and this is when we can deliver it. But if I had not like put those boundaries there, I feel like I would have just been like, okay, I'll be the sacrificial lamb, right? Like I'm just gonna go in there and kill myself for it, then let all beaten, hey, I couldn't do it, right? Because you just couldn't. So that was one thing I think a lot of people need to be a bit more firm on, like their boundaries, and basically say, no, this is what happens. Because especially with kids, your priorities change, and it's either going to be let's work with your manager to make sure these priorities and these new boundaries are discussed, or you blow up one day, and you're like, I can't take it anymore.
And then it's interesting because both of us now are going down the entrepreneurial path, right? So we have enough time to spend the time we want to with our kids. And I think I wouldn't say that I blew up, but I had it was the last straw, right? Like the straw that broke the camel's back. Just no, right? Just no. And now even and I think most entrepreneurs kind of do this, right? Like they kind of waffle between it's like, maybe I'll go get a job, or like, no, I would never do that. Right. Like I actually had this, I had a recruiter reach out to me, and I'm like, let's see what they have to say. And one of the things that I know about myself in my current situation, so my son is 4, he's in that first 5 years range, right?
Nice.
He's going to school a couple mornings a week, but not it gives me 4 hours to work. It doesn't give me 8 hours a day. And so I want to pick him up from school. I want to be able to do crafts in the afternoon. That's something that's important to me right now. One of the other things I know about me as an employee is that I'm very smart. I catch on to things quickly, and I'm very effective with my time. And so I've had so many jobs where my job responsibilities would take me 2 hours a day. Right. And so I'm I am in the point in my life where I'm not willing to just sit at a desk for 6 hours a day, because I did what you needed me to do in 2 hours and I work full time. Right. So if that's the mindset, I'm not going to go work for an organization that has that kind of mindset. Right. And most of them do still at this point. And so it was really, because I said that to the recruiter. I'm like, I don't believe in butts and seats. I don't believe in experiential work that takes 8 hours a day. And quite honestly, if I thought it was going to take 8 hours a day, I would tell you, yeah, sure, I think this is going to take 8 hours a day and I'll need 8 hours a day to get it done. But what you're telling me doesn't sound like an 8 hour a day job to me. And so what's interesting when you do start to set those, and I'll be that's an aggressive boundary, everybody. That's super aggressive, not in terms of hey, I have 30 minutes, not 2 hours. That's a great boundary and a great example that Erick gave, because otherwise, I tell this to people all the time, people will take your time, right? They will take it. If you give it, they will take it. For sure, people will take it. So it has to be our responsibility to maintain that. And then it's also our responsibility to say, I don't believe in this, right? I don't believe in butts in seats for 8 hours just to say a butt was in a seat for 8 hours. Here's the job. Do this, right? Get it done. And I even believed that when I was a manager. So I know that there are people out there who believe that, who are not just me. But for this, these first 5 years in parenting, I just don't think we're having enough conversations in the workplace about how can we problem solve. And we have the lovely Dan Roth joining us. Hi, Dan, who is a father of twins, young twins in the 0 to 5 age range, and works for Amazon, right? So the interesting thing is just like and I think maybe this is my perspective coming from the female perspective, the one who carries the baby, right? And there's like a visual knowledge, I guess, from like the work environment, like your belly gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and people are like more mentally prepared for you to go away because they've seen that process happen. And I would, it's an assumption, but I would assume that's not as common from the dad side of the equation, or the not carrying the child side of the equation. But it's, what if? I love a good what if, right? And I'm just thinking like, what if companies made the same kind of investment in their employees' children as they made in making sure we have enough highlighters for everybody at the office, right? Like we all have, like, let's look at my husband's company, right? So he works for a grocery company in Canada. There's like 170,000 employees, right? So that is potentially a lot of parents doing a lot of parenting, right? Mm-hmm. And what if, I'm not even talking about necessarily something that is financial in nature, but just that space, right? The space for parents to work remotely, or the space for parents to actually not be actually. And again, this is why I know these places exist. And I think the important thing is to keep the conversation going. Because when early on in my career, I was working for a direct mail house, and I was young, I was single, right? So some of the things that they did as a company didn't make sense to me. Now, from a parenting perspective, I can see how they're definitely helpful. But like one of the things that we all ate lunch together every day, right? And there was like a phone rotation. There was a phone in the lunchroom. So if like someone called the company, one person was responsible that day for answering the phones, but we were all in the lunchroom and we all took a break together. And I was like, this is dumb. I could get so much more work done if I just ate at my desk. And it was something I really missed about that experience. Like in my experience was the point of trying to like create space for people to be people, not just to work. And I think that there is a lot more opportunities for companies to just look at how could we create space, right? Like you got 2 school-age kids in dance. Okay, we're going to assume that a couple times a year they have dance recitals, and you get dance recital days off, right? I don't know. I'm just making things up. But I think the conversation is the critical starting point for where we can start to discover, like, what are some things? Maybe this parent just really wants to avoid having to go to like the school musical. So they really enjoy the fact that they have to tell their kid they can't come, right? Like that's possible. But I guess really what I'm kind of rambling now, but the point that I keep coming back to is that if we don't talk about it, we don't create the space for people who want this space. And then the individual's experience is that this person doesn't care about me, or this company doesn't care about me, right? And I'm not just, the bigger the organization you get into, the more likely it is that you start to feel like a number, right? Like my husband's company, I don't even know how many people work for Amazon. Like, but if you're 1 in 170,000 employees, you have the opportunity to feel like 1 in 170,000, or you have the ability to feel like 1 of 1 because you are who you are and we care about what you care about. Ooh, can we talk about that for a second? Because I actually had an HR department once tell me, and like, so we're at like a team event, and the HR team is like, we care about what you care about. So make sure that you come and tell us what you care about. Yeah. So I did that. Right? I was like, okay, like these are 2 of the things. Like there's a lot of things that happen at this company and it's meh for me, but these are 2 things that are really meaningful to me. And it makes me feel part of the team when we do these things. the immediate response was like, oh no, we're not going to do that. And I was like, well, why did you bother like extending the invitation for me to tell you what's important, right? It's the same reason why I don't like most market research, because people just like collect information and then do nothing with it. But Erick, I'd love to hear your perspective on that, and just like opening the conversation. But actually, let's go here. What does it take from your perspective as the parent, as someone who's trying to build a career and a parenting experience? What would it take for a company to make that conversation meaningful to you?
It's so I worked at a really great company. I was working at Edwards, and they tend to, from the corporate level, it seems like they go out of their way to, train the managers. Now, the piece that I've seen is the more impactful is when the managers actually take care and they take the time to actually build trust. A manager can basically go through the company checklist and be like, do this, and this, and it will feel like there's no communication, right? It's just basically going through the motions because we have to. But for example, if a manager starts to notice some things, right, and then the manager won't know that unless he or she pays attention.
Right.
Is this individual missing targets? How often are they staying late? And not necessarily stay late as a, they're working for a bonus. No, it's like they're staying late and their family might be suffering because of it. Right? You start to see the human side of it, not just the checkbox there for promotion side. Mm-hmm. And so you start to have those conversations, and a lot of times what I've noticed is people won't be pretty straight up with how they feel at first, right? So they'll say, no, it's fine, I can work late. But in their mind, they're like, yeah, I'm not doing well at all at home, And so a leader, when they're able to show care by saying, you know what, thank you for working overtime this weekend, I want you to take a day off next week, just take the day off, right? Or what I've seen is also, my parents, for example, they have some workers. They when they notice somebody that has done above and beyond, they will go and they'll buy a dinner gift card to a place, and they will basically leave it on a note saying, for you and your family, right? Just to say, go treat yourself out. You put your family on this side for us. Now let us put ourselves on the side for you and your family. So that kind of stuff shows that there is a bit of care, and then you start to open those conversations. So when you ask them, how are you doing, and they say, yeah, I'm okay, and then they're like, well, how are you really doing? Okay, can we improve that? And then they can start opening up. And so that relationship between the leader and the employee is incredibly important. But that's only half of it, in my opinion. The other half is on the employee. They need to be able and willing to speak up a bit, right? Because a lot of times, say you came from a company that did not have the best intentions in mind for you and your family, and you are carrying that baggage. You're scared. You have that trauma maybe, and you don't speak, even though there is no reason why you shouldn't, because your company's trying, your leaders are trying, your coworkers are helping you, and yet you're still very, very guarded. So it is just taking that courage to say, you know what, I'm going to take a step, take a risk, and we'll see where things go. So I think it's a two-part thing on the company, the leaders, and the individuals.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's also kind of like a personal clarity piece, right? Like you really have to own the experience you want to have, right? Like what is the type of experience you want to have at home? What is the type of career experience that you want to have? And I've found for me, I've worked for lots of different companies, and I've learned a little bit about each of those things in different scenarios over the years. And so they come together in this place of, okay, like this is what I want right now. This is what is important to me. Same reason why we moved out to the country over the summer, because we're like, I want more space, right? Like, want more space. We don't want to feel rushed all the time. And that's what it felt like in the city. So we moved out into the country, and sometimes I'm still surprised that like no one will honk at somebody if they're just like still stopped at a green light. And like everybody's so polite. They're just like, we're just waiting for them. Don't even worry about it. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. Plus it takes like now 10 minutes to get anywhere in the town I need to go. But you have to know those things. I guess you really have to just like you have to own what you want, right? And then you have to give that some level of importance, right? A lot of us, when we're going, especially if like you're a parent and you're in an like interviewing process right now, or maybe you're a parent who's like just coming back from maternity leave or ready to come back from paternity leave and re-enter a new, I'll call it a new environment because you are new. So even you going back to your old environment is going to feel new. Being able to like pay attention to those things that are important to you and give them credit, right? Say that like, yeah, my company and companies are great at this, right? Like they know their expectations of me. Their expectations are I work these hours, that I do this, I do it in the office, or I do it at home, or I check in on these days and blah, blah. Companies are very good at creating that kind of thing. And us as individual humans are not necessarily as good at it in being and I think that's because of this like balance of power that has historically been in place, right? Like the company has the power because they employ you, and therefore you by nature have no power. But I think what we've seen through the Great Resignation and all these new words, right? Quiet quitting and all of these things that have been made up since the beginning of COVID. The fact of the matter is the power dynamics are shifting. All of a sudden, employees do believe that they have a voice. And so it's not about being unreasonable. It's not about being demanding. It's just about sharing, right? And Eric, one of the things you talked about that I love, and I think this is another thing that is overlooked a lot, is that management teams and company cultures can do a lot of things, but if I don't let that happen, if I won't participate in it from an employee's perspective, it doesn't matter that they're putting in all of that work. I can have like I've had this experience as a manager, right? For me, it was always the most important to me. As far as I was concerned, as a manager, my job is to make sure that people have what they need to do their job and then report KPIs. But like that's it, right? So I had one employee and I'm still like his biggest fan. And if he ever hears one of these, he's going to be like, yeah, she's talking about me. But like young guy just out of college. And one of the things he knew about himself is that he embraced the Pomodoro method, which is a like time management methodology. So it's like you work for 20 minutes, you take a break for 5 minutes. And he was like, I'm like the most productive when I can use this technique. And so I said to him, I'm like, well, I can't guarantee that that's always available to you, because if we have like an hour-long meeting or a team offsite or whatever, I can't promise that that is going to be available to you 100% of the time. But I can tell you that you can do that for most of your day, right? Make it work for you. I only care about your work getting done and getting it done well, right? Like I'm an A+ kind of person. So I believe in excellence. But I also believe that in order for me to get your version of excellence out of you, I have to give you the space you need to create excellence. I can't dictate that. And so it would have been possible in that scenario for me to be like, yeah, manage your time however you want. And for him to still not do that. Right? I had lots of employees where I made the invitation for a conversation like that, and we never had it, right? So I never knew what would help them more. I even had this really cool, and I recommend it to all managers every time I share this on any kind of show, a start, stop, keep methodology, which was weekly. I would touch base with the team and ask them, what's one thing I could start doing that would help you more? What's one thing I should stop doing because it makes your life harder? And what's something I need to keep doing because it helps you? And people would respond. Some of them would respond in like the team meeting. Some of them would send me emails. Some of them would tell me in like a one-on-one meeting. But the point was that like legitimately, my belief is that I'm here to help you, right? And I think that kind of plays back to what you said too, Eric, about like not just as a manager checking a list saying like, I had a one-on-one with every employee this month. Like that doesn't matter if you didn't listen, if you didn't care, if you didn't pay attention. I don't know. I'm thinking now of the show The Office, and I don't know how familiar everybody is with it. But there's this one episode where Michael, the branch manager, is doing like performance reviews. And I think it's Pam comes in and he's just, oh no, Angela. Angela comes in and he's like, your work has been totally satisfactory. Away you go. And that was like the entire performance review. And his boss was there and she's like, is that how you're doing all of these performance reviews? Anyway, funny show. But this is the thing, right? There's this like level of caring. So we've talked about a lot of things, Eric, but what are some of the things, you've talked about some of them already, but what are some of the things we could give managers as a takeaway to kind of just like, what are some things we could be curious about when it comes to people's journeys of parenting and their career together?
Oh, that's a great question. What are some things that we could give managers to be curious about us in the parenting career journey?
Yeah.
Okay. Curious. I think that's a tough one. I think you might get different answers depending on if it's a mom or a dad, right? I think
from the dad perspective.
Okay, from the
I'll
dad
add my from the mom perspective.
Yeah, please. I would love to know about your perspective. For me, that's a great question. If it's a newborn, I would like to see how I'm doing just overall. Because I mean, you get a new kid and your world gets thrown upside down. Like you said, your priorities change a lot. You're not sleeping all that much, so you're tired, so your performance sometimes decreases, and if it increases, get ready for a crash, because that's just going to happen, and that's what happened to me. So being I guess sensitive to those kind of things, to those just bipolar shifts that will happen, and just I would say have a bit of empathy with that kind of stuff. I've seen too many people kind of rush immediately to, they didn't do this, they were supposed to, here's the blame, right? Or the judgment piece.
Right.
But just be more inquisitive, like, hey, what happened? It's done. Just tell me a bit about what occurred. How can I help you? Like you said, like, what can I start doing to help you set you up for success? I would say being able to show that genuine interest, that genuine care, will allow people to open up more, because after you have a kid and you're in that state of limbo where you don't sleep very much, you tend to be more open and vulnerable, right? If you just came from a toxic work environment, you're pretty close, but now that you have a kid, your heart's pretty open. So I think that's a great opportunity to get to know somebody, get to know how they feel, how their life has changed, how their priorities have changed. What does next year look like for you? What are your plans now that you have a new kid? Are you going to stay in the area? Are you plan to move? Just, there's like these genuine questions that you can ask to learn more about this person. And the thing is, if they say, hey, yeah, we're planning to move next year, great, you have a heads up now. The question would be, what are you hoping to do and how can I help you get there, right? That's something I work with my manager. I told him that I wasn't going to stay in the company long term, that I told him before I even plan on leaving, right? And when I told him what I wanted to do, he started setting up opportunities for me to develop skills like training, coaching, developing courses. And he set me up for success, even though the success laid outside of his field. But that created a lot of trust between us, a lot of friendship. And so when we left, I'm like, yeah, I mean, you're a friend to me, not just the person I reported to. So those are some of the pieces of advice. Just take that genuine care and interest.
Yeah. And I think, to me, that speaks very highly to making time for that, right? Because I do think most people, all people, no, but most people, yes, are good intentioned people. It's just, and I've experienced this, I've even done it myself in corporate work environments, where you just get so zoned in on like the to-do list for today that you forget that there's people here. You forget that you're a people as well, right? And I think this is something that I speak to a lot in pretty much all of the areas that I work within, is the ability to create space for those things. And maybe even, shall we say, KPIs, right?
Yeah.
I'm really glad you brought up the sleep thing, because this is, especially in like the first 4 months of having a new baby, like you just don't sleep.
No.
Let's be honest. You don't have consistent sleep. It's really hard. You're mostly a zombie. And in Canada, we're lucky. We actually get you get 16 weeks for sure of maternity leave for the mother to heal. And then you get up to 52 weeks. So whatever the difference is in that, that you can split as parental leave. So the mom can take it or the dad can take it. And it's awesome. But in that time frame, you go through like tons of different things. And one of the, like, my husband and I were having conversations about like, well, like, does it make sense for you to be a stay-at-home mom? This is the cost of childcare, right? Like, or maybe it makes sense for you to be a stay-at-home dad. Would you like to be a stay-at-home dad? And these are the type of conversations like I don't know about most people, but we never had before like our son existed. And you're going through like almost an identity crisis, because now you have this new component of your identity that you didn't have before, and you don't know until you have that how you're going to feel about it. And that was one of the things that my boss, I really appreciated that she said to me, because I'm like, yeah, I think I'll probably be back after like 6 months. And she's like, don't say that, because you have no idea. Right. And then I was like, oh yeah, there's no way I'm going back in 6 months. But it's just, it is being curious, right? And I think sometimes to like, so Eric and I are both parents, right? It's a little bit easier for us to extrapolate what someone might be feeling because we have had our own parenting experiences. But there's a lot of people who aren't parents, right? And so it is just that being curious, like, how are you? Like, how does this job, this would have been something really interesting from my perspective in retrospect, is being like, how does the job, how did the hours, how does everything like feel like it works for you now that you're balancing it with something else, right? And ideally making it feel like that's something else you believe is important, right? I believe that parenting is one of the most important jobs that people do, and we don't give it enough credit because it doesn't get paid, right? Like we don't get paid to be a parent, yet we're raising the next generation of people who are going to run our economies. And I'm not saying that this is what parental leave is about. So you get paid, so you get that time. But at the same time, every stage, and I'm sure you've experienced this too, Eric, like at every stage of your children's development, there's something new, right? And there's a different way you feel like you would like to support them now. Quite honestly, as infants, they're pretty easy, right? Besides the fact that you're getting no sleep, right? Like you feed them, you change them, you cuddle them. That's pretty much it, right? Yeah. And then once kids start to go to school, they start learning that they're different or that they're good at this and not good at this. And there's a whole bunch of different things. And then let's not even talk about teenagers, right? Because we've all been teenagers and we know what that was like. So at each stage of these journeys, there's different pressures on parents. And I just think it's important to invite in that conversation about like, hey, I know that your career is important to you. You are important to this company and we value your contribution. And I know that you want to contribute to your family, right? Like, what does that look like for you? And maybe even that in itself would prompt something different for people to think about, right? Like, I know my husband, and I think this is, again, I'm extrapolating based on my experience, but in Canada, it's very common for the mom, the person who birthed the child, to take a year of their maternity leave, and for a dad to take 4 weeks off, 5 weeks off to help, and that they have to use their vacation days to do that, right? And you're like, and that's why they cap it, because they're like, I've been saving up my vacation for a year so I can take this time off to spend with my new baby. But then even in my experience, right, I'm like, well, now I've had this first 4 weeks and I'm really used to this balance between me and my husband and him being here all the time. And now he's back at work and I have to refigure it out, do it on my own. And I have to assume from the leaving party's perspective that you're like, man, I wish I was just home with the baby and my family, right? And And this is, again, why I think it's so important to have these conversations, because how much more beneficial could it be for all parties involved if the manager just expected that that was someone's experience, right? Like, I can imagine that you're missing your kids right now. So maybe when you come back to work after that, you work from home for the first 4 weeks. So then you're like still kind of there, but we're like easing you back into it. And I think it's just, again, like, I think sometimes from a corporate perspective, we're being a little greedy, right? We're saying, like, I want 8 hours of your time when I don't really need 8 hours of your time, right? Like, what do I really need from you today, right? Okay, I need you to like, I have experience, like, I used to work in customer experience, right? So sometimes a client has an urgent need, which is almost never urgent, but in their opinion it's urgent, and so we treat it like it's urgent, right? And so I'm like, that's fine. Like, I can watch my emails and make sure that nothing is urgent. I can answer a phone call if I get it, but that also doesn't mean that I have to sit at my computer and play solitaire all day because I'm supposed to work for 8 hours, right? So I think it's just, whether we're talking about the parenting experience or any other like life experience that's impacting a human, I think there's more space than we give credit for. And if we wanted to, and if we were intentional about it, then we can find the space and we can make things work for people without, like, I just can't. I'd love to get this, and then we'll wrap this up, Eric. But I'd love to get your opinion on this, in terms of, like, in your opinion, this is straight up opinions, right? I'm going to say I don't have any proof, but this is my opinion, right? I don't think that creating that type of space takes away from performance or metrics or KPIs. I think that making that space creates more space for us to achieve things together as a team. So I'd love, as a wrap up, Eric, to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, when you're worried about your family, your kids, you're missing them, your mind is gone. It's elsewhere. You're doing things, you're not doing well. You have to go and review them, redo them. So when you're at peace, and for example, having that flexibility to work from home, I know that my family is cared for. I know if my wife needs me, she can call me and I'll go out there. And even during meetings, I could just be like, I need to walk away from a little bit, turn off the camera, walk off, and then come back. And honestly, that peace of mind allows me to be far more productive. And after I had the little one, I felt like I was honestly getting my work done in 4 hours, 6 hours, right? And I was like, I have time and I can start knocking off other little dominoes. And I would set low expectations. So I'm like, I can only do like one thing today. If everything falls apart, if baby ends up in the hospital, whatever, what is the one thing that I'll get done? And more than that thing got done almost every day, right? And so just having that peace of mind, like, enlarging or enhancing my duties as a father, allow me to enhance my duties at work, because I had that space, like you said, that flexibility. Like, I can be here, I don't have to worry about them, and the work got done, and I was just like, it's good. It almost felt like vacation a lot of times, and which is what allowed me to continue building and ultimately become an entrepreneur, right? Normally, if I was going to work, coming home stressed out, I would have no time. And in the past, I felt like I had no time, no energy, nothing for anything. But being able to prioritize things correctly, have the flexibility, I was able to build my own thing while doing well at work and while making sure that my family was better than before. So
See, I'm a big believer in this. And I think it's still, we're not seeing a lot of it. So that's why I like to bring it up in the conversation. But when we create space, there's more space, right? And it seems like it doesn't make sense. It's like the same phenomenon. I don't know if anybody else experiences this, but when you like walk into a house and it has no furniture in it, and it seems like all the rooms are really small, and then you put all the furniture in and the room seems bigger, and you're like, I don't understand how this phenomenon works, but it's totally a thing. Next time, check it out. But this is the thing. Space begets space, right? But then not only do we have space, but we're using space for the things that are meaningful for us. And more time, like the higher percentage of time we can spend doing things that are meaningful for us, makes us want to keep doing the things that are meaningful for us, and to do them for people like your manager, Erick, who create that space for you, because that's an intentional trust building exercise, right? That's me giving you trust. It's not you earning trust and then me giving it to you. It's me giving you trust, and we are in a relationship together. And I'm investing in you and where you're going. I'm not just investing in you because I have a background in sales as well, right? So like, I want your sales dollars on the table, right? Like, I'm investing because I care about your success as a human, right? And I think it's about shifting that belief in that, like, success as a human, whether that includes parenting, doesn't include parenting, includes a full-time career, a part-time career, volunteering, right? Taking care of sick parents or sick family members, right? Like, when we create the space for people to do the things that are meaningful for them, that is trust. That's a trust exercise. And I think it's something that we can all do. We can all give to other people, whether you're an entrepreneur or a manager or a frontline employee or a customer experience rep or a mom or a dad, or like, there's space we could give. This is a conversation for a different day, but like, how much more I've always found with my son, if he is having, he doesn't really tantrum, but you can tell he's getting upset about something, and it's almost never about the thing, right? Like, he's not actually upset about putting his boots on. He's upset about something else, right? And when I take 5 minutes to try to understand what actually is going on, it's much more productive. We don't have to spend 20 minutes tantruming. We save that 15 minutes, and now I can use that 15 minutes to actually get where I was going on time. And the same thing works in the corporate work environment, right? When we take the time to do the things that matter to the humans, it makes more time available for people. So, hey, everybody, what you learned today is that maybe if we just have a conversation about what's meaningful to people and include parenting and careers on the spectrum of those things that can be meaningful to any one individual, then we can even find more space to find time and reward in both of those things. All right. I didn't tell you before if we went live, Erick, but I almost always go long. So this is pretty normal. But before we wrap up today, Erick, if people are interested in learning more about you and your journey and how you help people create these goals of combining parenting and careers and what that looks like for them, where is the best place for them to find you?
Usually LinkedIn. I appreciate it, Tracy. But yeah, just send me a message on LinkedIn, connect. In the next month or so, I'll start to put a lot more stuff in there. And next year, I'm going to launch a program particularly tailored to taking the power from, or basically showing you that you always had the power within you. And it wasn't 100% on your employer to be like, hey, we hold the power over you. You're ours. No, it's you. You are your own person. And we'll teach you that. So.
Ooh, sounds like there might be some good boundaries lessons coming in that. So definitely connect with Erick, everybody. It's been so wonderful for me to watch your journey, Erick, and to just watch how every time you share, it's so empowering for people. And so definitely recommend very minimally a follow on Erick, but connect with him, everybody, and stay in the conversation. This is how we wrap up every of the conversations. But if this was a conversation that was particularly meaningful to you based on where you're at in your journey, connect specifically with Erick. This is what he talks about all the time. Connect with me. I'm also a parent. Well, maybe I won't say connect with Dad because he probably got enough people connecting with him because he's a recruiter. But like, connect with people who care about this conversation so you can stay in the conversation and you can explore for yourself, what are my parenting goals? What are my career goals? How do they fit together? And how can I make them available to other people so that we can be in it together to make these things happen? So thank you, everybody, for hanging out today. Thank you so much, Erick, for sharing all of your knowledge and expertise in this arena. I really appreciate it. And until next time, everybody, permission to do you.